This is the first time I've done this presentation, so I'm trying to do it in exactly 60 minutes. So I don't know whether it'll take 60 minutes or not, but we'll see. So I mean, if you go to the London Film School, apparently it's 2 years full time, and it costs you £10,000. So I'm going to try and do it all in 60 minutes, and it's for free. So hopefully that'll be good. So let's make a start. So my first slide: what story are you going to tell? That's, you know, I always focus on story. It's the most important thing to me. You know, the action's cool, but you know, it's a story that's going to drive people. That's what's going to make people connect with your film. Now, I recommend if you've never done this, Google the hero's journey. There's some great stuff online about this, and if it's kind of a rule for how all great stories are told, and all the myths, all the religious myths, and in Star Wars, you know, it's all based on these rules. There's a formula to a good story. If you look at it, it's you know, the adventure. He starts off here. He gets a call to adventure. Then he refuses it, which is like Luke. You know, he meets Obi-Wan. He gets a call to adventure. He refuses it, but then he takes the call, and then he crosses into the other world, which is kind of Mos Eisley spaceport. And then he's, you know, and as he goes through, he meets a mentor, and that drives him forward. And then he faces his biggest challenge yet. You know, and all these. If you look at these stories, if you read about this formula, and then you rewatch, say, Star Wars or The Matrix, one of these films like that, you'll see it all fit in. And then if you have that in your mind when you're actually editing your films, when you're editing your story, you can think, oh yeah, that's something. You know, you've got to, like for instance, there's a scene here where when they first try something, they've got to fail. Like it's like in Star Wars, it's Luke on the Millennium Falcon when he's doing his practice with his lightsaber, and he's getting fired at. He's failing as a Jedi, so you have to fail first. In Wide Boys 1, it's when Pete can't do that, when Tom can't do that first problem. You know, so if you're aware of these formulas, suddenly your stories will flow. So now, how are you going to tell your story? What are you going to put on this timeline? You know, you've got loads of options. It's not just what you're shooting at the day. You know, you've got other options to sort of fill this timeline full of good stuff to tell your story really well. So I'm going to go through a few of the elements that make up the story. So interviews. I mean, I love interviews. I'm really passionate about interviews. And I'm going to talk a lot about interviews later on, about how to shoot them. Because there's one thing that will make you stand out as a complete punter, and that's a really badly shot interview. You know, I see them on the web all the time. They're just badly composed, eyeline all over the place. So I'm really into interviews. But they were great well at telling stories as well. So really practice your interview skills. It's really useful. So interview is one element. Next element, narration or comedy. Now, I got told by a guy who did go to film school. I should point out, I never went to film school, of course. And he was told that on his first day at film school, that this was a documentary course, by the way, that the moment you use a line of narration, you've failed as a filmmaker. That is a bit harsh, you know, because there are some great films which are narrated, you know. I mean, March of the Penguins did okay. Shawshank Redemption, not bad, you know. Yeah, exactly, you know, so it's a bit harsh. But I think what the point is, narration is actually really hard. You think it's easy, you just write a load of stuff and then speak it into a mic and put it on a film, but it's really hard to do good narration. So if you've got to do narration, you know, you need someone who can write it first, then you need someone who can record it professionally. So I use narration a little bit, but I tend to use, you know, I use an actor, you know, a professional actor. We record it really well, and we're using mostly kind of bringing poetry to life or written accounts from the past or whatever, that kind of thing, you know. I've not made a film with actual kind of proper narration for a while. I've never been happy with the ones I did make with narration. So live action footage. This is the kind of core of your film, you know, all your footage. Now, what I would say is, if you're shooting climbing, don't just shoot the climbing. Shoot as much as you can other than the climbing. Or if you're shooting kayaking, don't just shoot them kayaking down the river. Shoot them getting up in the morning, getting ready to go, putting the boots on, all that kind of stuff, you know. Shoot as much as you can that isn't actually the sport, because generally the sport's pretty dull, you know. Certainly in climbing's dull. So you've got to shoot stuff that isn't dull, you know. So, and also when you look at your film, you know, it should be a real mixture of different types of shots, not just all climbing, you know. So, the other thing I say about live action footage, when you're just getting different shots of them putting the boots on, a real great tip I think is always shoot headshots. So if you've got someone putting the boots on, get a shot of the head. If you've got someone putting the rope on, film face shots are really interesting, and linger on them. You know, film someone's head for like, you know, a minute, And then when you come to the edit, so you've got a line of narration, and you say that in a line from an interview, and the interview's saying, yeah, I was really worried about what was going to happen next, and I was really concerned about this. You put the shot of the headshot in, and it just looks like that's what they're thinking. You know, it's a magical trick. Shoot headshots, really useful. GVs. GV stands for general view, sometimes also called, well, someone told me it stood for grassy valleys, but so it's basically landscape shots. But don't just think it is landscapes. It's not just all big landscapes. You've got to think about the big and the small here, you know. So if you're shooting, don't just shoot, you know, the big valleys and the mountains. Look down, shoot the moss, shoot the, you know, insects, anything. Again, we're looking for visual interest. Anything that isn't the, you know, the action you're trying to film, you know. And the more GVs you have, the more visually interesting your film will be. The more people will connect to it. So yeah, shoot loads of GVs. Next element you can put on your timeline. Reconstructions, docudrama. You know, you don't have to. I mean, as soon as you think of drama, you think, oh, it's going to cost you, you know, thousands of pounds to shoot a drama scene. You can just shoot drama scenes really, really cheaply in the outdoors. You know, if you're not worrying about lights and that kind of thing. I mean, I shot some drama scenes for my film E11, and it was kind of Dave McLeod being a young kid coming and seeing the crag for the first time, you know. And I just advertised on UKC for, you know, I wanted someone who looked. Well, I had two things I was looking for. I was looking for firstly for a sort of teenager who would looked a bit like Dave McLeod. He looked about 14. And I was also looking for a dog that could fetch for another docu scene. And luckily someone replied and said, well, my dog looks like Dave McLeod, so he can do both. But if you've got elements of your story, you won't have footage of your athlete or your climber when they were 12 the first time they went kayaking. But why not reshoot it? Get a 12-year-old, put some art, you know, shoot it like it's a cine film, you know, put an effect on it. It's just, you know, recreate it, you know. The other thing, it's just slightly different reshoots as opposed to reconstructions. Like this is a shot from E11 again. It's the hand on top, just as about it hits the top of the root and then he falls off. Now obviously, you know, I only had two cameras there, one on the face, one on the wall. I wasn't standing there waiting for the shot, but it actually happened, you know. So I went back a week later, shot him, hit that, filled out, you know. So basically, plan your shoots. You know, you can't shoot everything live, so shoot as much as you can live. And obviously, there's the things you can recreate, things you can't. Like you couldn't recreate the moment when he tops out and he's done the route, he's been trying, he's done it, you know, that's genuine emotion. So shoot what has to be real first, and then go back, shoot the close-ups, shoot the wides, all that kind of, put that in. So just don't think, if you missed the shot at the time, doesn't mean you can't put it in the film. Go back a week later, shoot it again, hopefully with a similar light, and if not, learn colour correction. The other thing you can do as well, which is a nice trick to get some footage, is handycam. You give your athlete their own camera and say, away you go, you know, take this for a month, shoot yourself, see what you get. You know, it depends on who you give it to. You know, you might get some really good stuff. You might get, you know, 5 hours of complete, you know, rubbish, but it's worth doing. I mean, this scene again from 11 was shot by Dave's wife. It's him redecorating his bathroom with an ice axe. You know, it gets a great laugh in the film. You know, and I wouldn't have shot that, you know, so it's quite. You can do diary cams as well. You know, a lot of kind of TV reality shows. You know, they give their athletes a diary cam and tell them how to use it. So again, it's kind of a quick win because you're not having to do the shooting. Archive footage and stills. I mean, if you can get any archive footage, awesome, you know, and stills. You can do a lot with stills as well. I mean, obviously I make climbing films, and there's a history of climbing photography, and there's a lot of great things you can do with that. I love using archive footage, archive stills. So it's really kind of adds a depth to your film. You know, if you can tell a story that's got that. The other thing we can do, you know, again, just to make your film stand out a bit, if you can get some animation in there, it's great. I got told once that if you want to win an award at a film festival, you need to put some animation in. You know, it just raises your film a bit more. The problem is you either know how to do it, or find funds to do it, or find someone to do it for free, or because it's not cheap, you know. But it really adds an extra element to the film if you can do it. And also, again, it gives you a chance to tell a story you couldn't tell. You know, you could if an event happened and you didn't shoot it, you could animate it with cartoons. You know, Send the Films did this recently, and I don't know if anyone has seen what's the one, the Fighting on Everest film, High Tension. They didn't actually animate it; they did cartoons and then animated the cartoons. But you know, it's just an extra way of telling a story. Just more interesting than looking at a talking head in interviews. You know. Cool. Let's move on to the more kind of techie aspects of filmmaking now. Let's talk about camera work. So I don't want to get too techie into talking about which cameras to use and all that. You know, I don't actually think it's that important. All cameras are pretty similar. They all do the same sort of thing. But what we'll bang on about a bit is sound. You know, you've got to think about recording sound as like 50% of the job. You know, it's 50% of the work, it's 50% of the effort in post. So the more you can do in the acquisition stage, the better. You know, and invest in sound as well. Buy the best mics you can. Radio mics, amazing, and get some good headphones. And always record sound. Don't just. I think particularly the DSLR kind of generation. You know, are just running around with DSLRs with no mics, or if they got a little top mic on, it's, you know, it's just, you know, it's not getting quality sound. So invest as much as you can in quality sound, and always wear headphones. You know, there's no point recording sound if you're not wearing headphones. Really, it'd be like kind of, you would never, you know, record visual images without looking at the viewfinder. And if you're not wearing headphones, it's the same thing. You know, you've got to be listening to what you're recording. And you know, if you can get a good kind of directional mic, these are great bits of kit. I mean, this mic, I think it's about £400, £500 or something. But what that mic will last, you know, will last 10 years. You know, you buy a camera, if it lasts you 2 years, you're doing well. You know, so it's worth investing in mics. And juries love sound. You know, if you want to go to festivals, win awards, juries love sound. They notice bad sound. You know, it stands out. It's a funny thing that people will watch. You know, you can say if you're shooting on a mountain and your footage is like really wobbly because it's windy and your camera's full of rainwater and, you know, it's dark, and you know, people will watch any old crap on visually, but they won't stand for winning on audio. You know, badly, if you can't hear what they're saying, people will not put up with poor sound, but people put up with poor video. So you've really got to kind of work on your sound. This is I call this the happy helmet. It's a pair of Sennheiser HD25 headphones strapped on, gaffer taped very neatly onto a climbing helmet. So because it's quite awkward to wear headphones on a climbing helmet. So yeah, and these mics are great. They are directional, so they only record sound in that kind of this kind of direction. So it means that if you, for instance, if you're trying to record an interview and it's noisy behind here, like there's road traffic going here, if you point the mic this way and you speak to someone speaking there, then that's good. You know, you're not going to hear all that road noise. If you do it here, you'll hear them and you'll hear the road noise. So you think about where your mic's pointing. Now, I think radio mics are great, but this clip from my film Grit Kids 2008, this clip would only have worked with a radio mic. I mean, here we can hear him breathing, we can hear him whispering to himself, top rope, top rope, top rope. And it makes the film, it's the finale of the film. Without a radio mic, even with a £500 mic, we would have got nothing. We would have got, from where we were, we would have got wind noise. You know, we wouldn't have got the breathing, we wouldn't have got the whispering sounds. So radio mics are great. They're actually really hard to use well. It's all about when you position them. You've got to make sure you give a radio mic to a climber, you put it on, and then they'll need to put a jacket over the top of it. You know, and then you get really muffled sounds. Gore-Tex jackets sound terrible, they're all rustling around. And then the other thing about the radio mics is they only really work in kind of line of sight. I know they're supposed to be radio mics, but they don't work well if they won't go through rock. So if you put them in the front pocket and then they're in a slight chimney or something, the sound's gone. Or the other thing as well, they'll never go through water neither. If you're ever doing any kayaking films, you know, that doesn't work. And the other one that gets me all the time is you give it to a climber, they put it in the pocket, and then they put gear over it. So they've got like wires and crabs over the top of the radio mics. That completely ruins the sound. It's something to do with the waves, I guess. I don't really understand radio. But yeah, radio mics are great bits of kit. Again, they're about £400 or something, worth investing in. They do work really well with DSLRs actually, because you know, you can just plug one in. But it's nice, ideally what you want is a radio mic, and you want one of these as well. You know, you've got the best of both worlds then. And then if the radio mic does crap out, at least you've got some audio from this and a mix, you know. Let's have a quick drink. I think I'm talking very quickly, but you know, it is 60. You know, I've got to do everything in 60 minutes, so we'll move on. So another thing about audio, you've got, you know, on most cameras it gives you the option to record audio at an auto level or manual level. So this is the recording level. What level are you actually going to record the audio at? Now, when I did a film course in 2007. It was actually the first film course I did, like a technical film course, learning how about camera work, and it was trained by a BBC guy, a really good guy, Mark Batey. And one of the things he teaches BBC reporters, professionals, how to use this. And the first thing he'll tell you about sound is he'll say, never record on auto. And the reason for that is that if this mic is recording auto, if I stop speaking, it goes very quiet. And then it goes, that's quiet, I better turn the volume up. And suddenly it will record the traffic noise, the bar in the background, and all the kind of little hums around. And if I start speaking, it will then, it's loud, and it will drop down. What will happen is the hiss will go up and down, and it will sound terrible. So certainly if you ever record an interview and you're in a controlled situation, set the level, get the level, do a sound check, get them to speak into the mic, level it just right. But recently, in the last few years, I've actually started to love the auto button. It has a very special use. Particularly if you're recording climbing, I think auto is amazing. I would never put it on auto for interviews, but if you're recording climbing, you put it on auto. And what it does, that riding up and down effect, if Dave McLeod's climbing something, he's got his radio mic on, and that's set to auto. If he's climbing and he's just breathing, the breathing is the only sound, and suddenly it turns the volume up, and you record the breathing really well. But then he gets to the top of the pitch and he wants to shout to his mate for some rope. He's shouting full volume. There's no way you can set a level for that. You can't set a level that works for the shouting and will work for the breathing. Whereas auto will actually do that for you, and you get really good audio all the way through. So I now think unless you're recording an interview, put it on auto. That's controversial, but that's my recommendation. That's good. Let's move on to wind. So wind is the enemy. These are very kit, but this will only actually work up until about 15 miles an hour wind. Without without it, you're looking at if you get like 5 miles an hour wind, you've ruined the audio. One of these gives you about 50 miles an hour. You get a bigger one like this one here, and these ones you can actually put this one inside that one, and then you're good to about 40 miles an hour. So even with both of them, it's still quite hard to get good audio. And wind noise, once you get wind noise on, your audio's gone. It just sounds awful, and there's nothing you can do in post. You can't clean it up. There's no denoiser for wind. I mean, if you record audio here, and there's kind of background hum from the air conditioning or something, you can process that in post. You can find the frequencies that it matches and take those out and fix it. With wind noise, it's gone. So really be careful with wind noise. But you'll know that because you'll be wearing your headphones. If you're not wearing your headphones, you'll see your levels go up and down, and you think you're recording perfect audio. So that's why you've got to wear headphones. Otherwise, you've got no idea what's going down onto your tape. The other recommendation is to record wild track. I feel a bit guilty putting this up because I never do it. I should do it, and Chris is always on at me to do it. Chris Prescott works at Hot Takes, and he's a sound designer by trade. So he's really into sound. And so basically a wild track is you get to a location and you record like 2 minutes of audio just at the background. I did actually do this on my film Long Hope. So you're recording the sort of sound of the sea, the sound of the seagulls, the wind, just the kind of atmosphere. You get that 2 minutes down there, and then when you come to do the sound mix, you can lay that down first as a kind of base. Or if if you need to chop up some existing audio, you can put in a bit of blank background. Whereas if you don't have that, you play a bit of interview, and then the interview will have a load of seagulls on and wind noise, and then the interview stops, and suddenly it's silent. It will jump out, and then the interview starts again, and the wind noise comes back on. Whereas you put the atmosphere down first as a base, and then the interview on top. Obviously it'll be a slight dip and things in between, but you won't notice it. The audience will kind of just think it's all in one go. So it's just a great way. If you don't record wild track, it makes it harder when you come to do your sound mix. So wild track, and it takes like 2 minutes. I know I don't do it, but I should. So everyone should do it. Cool. Right, let's talk a bit more about actual camera work now, actual visual camera work as opposed to audio camera work. On that film course, Mark Batey told me his 5-shot rule, and I think this is genius. It's definitely something I use all the time. He basically said, whatever you're filming, whether you're filming someone climbing or someone kayaking, Or the example he used was a chef chopping a carrot. You're going to film a chef chopping a carrot in a kitchen, you know, and how do you film that? What shots do you need to make a sequence, to make the edit work? And he says you need 5 shots. Establishing wide, starting something that's called a mid shot. Close-up hands. You know, what's he actually doing with his hands? Close-up face. What is he thinking about? Well, I've already mentioned headshots before. It's the same thing. You know, close-up face, close-up eyes. Really emotive. Faces are really interesting. People's faces are fascinating. Human beings are, you know, they're drawn to faces. So, and the point of view, you know, basically the over-the-shoulder shot. You know, what's it like for him chopping that carrot? You know, and then the 5th one is something else, which is kind of funny, but it's where you could shoot looking out of the up at the table at the carrot, or you shoot from through the door into the kitchen, or a kind of low down shot with the table in the back, just something else. And then when you come to the edit, you just put these shots together, and the edit will just flow. If you come back with a tape just full of mid shots, you'll never be able to edit it because they don't cut. The flow of an edit you can't cut from a mid shot to a mid shot. You can cut from a mid shot to a tight, to a face shot, to a point of view, and it'll just flow. I'm going to show you a couple of examples now. So, mid shot, point of view, mid shot again, close up hands. I'm classing that as something else. Mid shot, an exterior. It's kind of a wide, but I think this is in the context of this sequence. It's something else. Close up face, and you can see you can kind of cut from any of those shots, and they always work. You can edit between them. Whereas you can't cut. I don't know if I can actually do this. You can't cut from that to that. It will jump out. It'll be a jump cut. It won't flow. It just gives you, and also if you're trying to, all the time in film, you're filming something that maybe takes an hour and you're making a 5-minute sequence. So you have to kind of jump the time. You need a way of getting from one point in time to another point in time. And this film does this very well, but you need the shots to do it. Whereas if you just got a mid shot, if you've got someone climbing up a cliff, and you cut from a mid shot of them, this is the cliff. You cut from a mid shot from them there to a mid shot of them there. There's a jump. Whereas if you cut from a mid shot from them there, and then a close-up of hands, and then a mid shot of them there, it flows perfectly. People don't go, oh, people understand the grammar of this. They don't think, oh, how's he just jumped up 50 metres? Even though it's just 1 5-second close-up of the hands, it sort of works. It's funny. Belay shots are beautiful, yeah. I don't know how many of you are actually into climbing, but if you're making climbing film, the real saviour, the joker card, is the belay shot. We use this all the time. So you got someone climbing, you cut to the belayer, you look at the belayer's face, oh yeah, and then suddenly we cut back to the climber, and they're about 50 metres higher. No one notices, Although we got this as a shot in Wide Boys 2, we do this to cover some pretty shaky camera work. Not mine, I have to say. But I do have some shaky camera work in the film, so shouldn't criticise it too much. But we had a big wobble on the camera, so we couldn't use that shot. So we cut to the belayer, and then we cut back to the climber. And it's a real shame. If that wobble had been there, we would have left the climbing sequence free. So it's kind of like a get out of jail free card as your belay shot. So I imagine there's an equivalent for other sports as well. But at least if you've got your 5 shots, you've got options in the edit. You can kind of do different things, So to go back to that 5-shot rule, I think it's genius. Right, so let's talk a bit about composition. And what I'm going to talk about this is rule of thirds. I think it's a very simple rule. I'm sure many of you have heard of it and used it. I think it's really powerful. I actually just did this in Premiere the other day. I built this little grid thing and just flipped through the film looking for examples of it, And it's amazing how often, just in case you've not heard of the rule is that you split the screen into thirds, and you potentially put something interesting in each third, and over these points here, this point, this point, this point, this point, real magical spots. Look at here, you've got that bang on the face, there, boom, the climber's in there. Interviews particularly, interviews and rule of thirds definitely go together. Normally you've got eyes or face here, depending on what sort of composition you've got. Looking space around here. We'll talk a bit more interviews in a minute. And also, another thing about rule of thirds is people often say that you're looking at you know, you've got something visually interesting in each corner. I mean, if you look through great photographs, you'll see this. You know, you'll see, you know, the mountains in there, nice clean frame there. You know, bit of gear in this one. It's amazing how it works. You know, but really look at these points. What you try to avoid here is, you know, a shot where it's sort of straight on. You know, the climber's face is right in the middle there. You know, load of space up here or something. You try to break that up. And of course, the thing about these sort of rules is that once you know them, then you can break them, and then you can be creative. You know, if you have a shot which is completely 50-50 like this, you know, it will actually kind of jar the audience, and it will go, ooh, you know, and it will work as long as you know you're doing that. If you do that accidentally, then it's just poor. But if you do it deliberately in the edit, then that's fine. So that's the thing about rules. You can break them as long as you know them. If you don't know them, you can't break them. I've got another little thing which I quite like as well. I call it the magic corner, which is, there's a thing about film, particularly in cinema, not so much in TV. In TV or on the internet, you know, you look at the screen, you know, you look at the whole screen in one go. In cinema, you look into the screen, you know, you look, your eyes can't take it all in. You know, even this, if it's in the front row here, you know, you can't look all that in one go. You sort of look, and a lot of the time you kind of read it like this. And, or your eyes hit here and then they go to here. So think about where the eyes are going, you know. But it does work as well, even just looking on the, you know, looking at a video on the web, particularly in editing, you know, when you go from one shot to the next. If you're going, here, your eyes will be focused at that point, looking at Robin. If you then cut to a climber, you could have something interesting there, and that's where the eyes will hit. So, you know, think about that on your transitions between the shots. But obviously the magic corner is this bottom corner. Because what will happen in theory, depending on the shot and how it's going, but a lot of the time you'll hit the screen and you go, oh, da, da, and you'll end up there. So I like, it's nice to place things in this bottom corner. Here we've got a little book, but in GVs I often have, look at my GVs, you often see like a bit of plant life here, you know, or, you know, you have a mountain here, da, da, and then, oh, nice flower. You know, it just kind of, it's a magic little spot, so that's my top tip. The other thing about composition, about interviews, is when you're working out where to crop, you know, where do you cut it off, you know, is just to avoid any natural joints in the body. So you don't crop like there, you don't crop at the shoulders, you don't crop at the elbows, you don't crop at the waist. You want to crop like mid-arm or mid-arm there or about there, you know, if you do that, it just looks really weird. Don't know what it is. So when you're composing your interview shot, you know, here you see it's kind of mid-arm, you know. I mean, it doesn't always work like that, but it's something to bear in mind when you're looking through it. Another thing as well, which I'm sure David will know about this, David Simonite, climbing photographer, is getting climbers to declutter the crag before they start climbing. You know, otherwise you're just asking for work in Photoshop. I mean, as everyone knows, stills is easy, but but in video, if you have clutter in the shot, it's actually quite hard to clean that up. In stills, it's not too bad. You just grab a bit of ground from there and put it over there. That's dead easy in stills. But in video, it's harder. You know, especially if it's handheld. If it's handheld, it's really hard to do it. If it's tripod, it's actually fairly easy. You know, if I shot this on a tripod, I think it's actually a tripod shot. What we could do is I would just grab a bit of that there and just put that on top of there. You know, just clean it up. But the easiest way of doing this is to actually, before you start climbing, just say, come on, clean your shit away, you know, get it around the corner, get it out of shot, and particularly your own stuff as well. There's nothing worse than seeing a camera bag open or a tripod stuck up, you know, it's just, that completely breaks all rules for me. You should never, I personally, you should never see any camera gear in shot at all, any cameraman in shot, definitely, and any rigging ropes. Totally breaks the rules for me. You know.
Can I just add into that?
Yeah.
A tip for people. If you're doing any climbing, filming or photography, when people turn up with the crag, do not let them immediately to the bottom of the room, because they'll just empty the bags everywhere. So take them away.
Get a clean shot.
Away from the climb, get them to gear up there, and then go to the climb.
Yeah, good. And you know, get your GVs of the climb. If you want some shots of the climb first, without ropes on it and people on it, and you know, get those shots first, which I didn't do on Wide Buzz 2, and it was a real problem in the edit. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so declutter. If you can do that at the time, it's so much easier than in post. You know, it just makes the shots, you know, makes you like a punter. You know, if you've got a load of stuff in shot. You know, you want to be looking professional. You don't have stuff in shot. You know. Cool. This is my amazing diagram. I drew this yesterday. I was hoping to use like a kind of PowerPoint drawing thing, but I was a bit rushed, so I just drew it on the back of a postcard. So I'm sure you guys don't know about cameras anyway, but so this is my camera, and pretty much all cameras are the same as this, you know. I mean, ND filters are actually built into ENG cameras and some cinema cameras, but if they're not, then it can be just a filter you screw on the front of your lens, you know. So basically, this here is the light. This is our subject, and the light's coming from our subject, hitting the sensor, going into the computer, and you've got, along the way, you've got 5 options of adjusting the exposure, which is kind of quite crazy if you think about it. You've got 5 different ways of saying how bright should this shot be. You know, the first hit, ND filters, we don't know what those are. They're like sunglasses for your lens. You just sort of take the shot out without adjusting it. Then you aperture. Now, of course, aperture, as well as making the shot brighter and darker, also affects composition with depth of field. I'll let you look that up. Shutter speed, of course. Now, shutter speed's more if you're coming from a stills background, shutter speed's a bit more complicated in that you're limited. You can only go, well, if you're shooting 25 frames a second, the slowest you can ever be is a 25th of a second. You know, obviously, if you're shooting stills, then you can leave it for 10 minutes if you want, you know, or longer. So you're limited to that. If you're shooting 50i, then you're 50th of a second. So there's some limitations in that. And then you've got the sensor itself, and then you have gain on the sensor. Or to you DSLR kids, gain is of course ISO. But it's the same thing, ISO, gain, exactly the same. In fact, on that camera there, it says both. You can choose, I know you can choose whether you're working ISO or you're working gain. It's the same kind of thing. I mean, in gain, it just talks in decibels, it's a bit nuts. But following gain, of course, is the more gain you put in, or the highest ISO you get artifacts, you get, you know, little bits then you have to then try and clean that up in post. So I mean, there's lots of different ways of setting your exposure. One thing I would say is that I always shoot in video. I always shoot in manual. I never shoot auto exposure. I don't think I ever do it. I mean, sometimes the camera's good at some things in auto. You know, like I've said about the sound, it's quite good at that. It knows what it's doing. It's quite good at white balance mostly. It can kind of work that so auto white balance. That's okay. But in terms of exposure, it just doesn't know how to do it. You know, it can never work out the correct exposure because it doesn't know what shot you want. You know, so you have to set that manually. So I mean, depending what sort of camera you're using. I mean, I tend to, you know, I don't know. Well, I tend to generally, when I'm shooting video, I tend to have the shutter speed set. It's like 25th of a second. I tend to leave it that, and then adjust the aperture. Obviously, I set the gain depending whether I need it or not. Normally, no gain unless it's dark. You know. And of course, you do have then the final option, of course, of fixing it in post. You know, you've got your shot; it's too dark. You can lighten it up, but there's limitations to that, particularly depending on what sort of camera you're using and what sort of bit rate you're coming in. If you're shooting on DSLR, you've got a bit rate of about 25 megabits per second, and that doesn't have much information in it. So if you're shooting a bigger camera, it's got like 50 megabits. There's more scope. There's more information in that black and in that white. You know, you can adjust it a bit. It's a bit like if you're shooting a still in DSLR, you shoot it in RAW. When you go to post, you can kind of, you know, you can pull more information out of the blacks. Whereas if you save it to a JPEG, then all that information is gone. You've just got the still. So there's limitations to post. You can do some work with it. Luckily, so exposure, there's lots of ways of setting it, but there's some great tools. If you're using a video camera, there are some great tools. DSLRs have some of these as well, and particularly if you're using electronic viewfinder with a DSLR. So I love the histograms. If you've got a histogram display on your camera, I recommend you use it and learn to read what that says. And the other things I love are zebras. Zebras are fantastic. I mean, I tend to set exposure using zebras, but then double check using the histogram. So zebras, if you've never used zebras, you can set them to sort of, you just set them in your camera. It's up to you how you set them, but you need to have a system and know that system. So I tend to set mine at like 90%. So what that's saying is everything that's 90% white, you know, 90% bright, will zebra. 90% and over will zebra. So here you can see that obviously the windows here are zebraing. They're really hot. The side of his face here with the window, that gets zebraed. So what I tend to do with that, if I'm zebraing at 90, I set that exposure, I pull it down until the zebraing just disappears from his face, and that's well exposed for me. But I also check this as well. But it's really about using the tools and starting and understanding what effects they have. But definitely what you need to check, particularly if you're ever using a higher camera or your mate's camera, you could have set zebras to anything. You know, it could be 50%. So if you might use my rule, it'd be just completely dark. You know, so always check if you've got zebras on, what the settings on. You know. Cool. So focus. Now this is a tricky one. Again, it's autofocus. You know, it's okay to use autofocus sometimes as long as you understand the limits of it. And the limits, the big limit of it is it doesn't actually know what you want to focus on. So you know, do you want to focus on that carabiner, or do you want to focus on Tom's bottom? You know, it's up to you. So, but the camera will never know that. So if you're trying to do a shot like that, you know, you've got to shoot that manually. You know, you've got to understand it. But it depends. Sometimes, you know, if you know the limits of that, and particularly if you're shooting on a smaller sensor camera and you're shooting at a high aperture, you know, autofocus will be fine. You know, if you're doing a kind of real run and gun, you've not got time to kind of set shots up, then autofocus is okay as long as you understand the limitations of it. And the other thing about focus as well is that it's one thing that you just can't fix in post. You know, you can't, if that isn't sharp, there's not much you can do. I mean, there are sharpening and effects, but they don't really work. If you mess up focus, the shot's gone. You know, there's not much you can do. So the first thing Mark Batey told me on the course, that was his first, we wrote this on the board, you know, the first day, was don't move the fucking camera. That was his first opening. And I think what he's talking about really is the kind of, he mentioned like, you know, the handy cam shots, you know, the home videos, you know, you get the camera and you sort of do all this kind of stuff and walk around, you know, and as soon as you do that, you know, it just looks crap. So his rule is just don't move the fucking camera. But I think what he really means really is don't move the fucking camera unless you know what you're doing. You know, unless you've got a deliberate kind of shot in mind. I'm just going to show you a little shot here, which is, and then I'll talk a little bit about movement. So by movement, I'm talking pans, tilts, and I'm going to include zooms in this as well. I know it's not technically a movement, but it's kind of like a movement. Right, so there's quite a lot going on here. So the first rule for movements is you're moving from one place to another. You're moving from, you establish your first shot should be a beautifully composed GB. You know, a nice shot to start with, well composed, thinking about the rule of thirds, all that, and then you're moving to another shot, which is the rule of thirds again. So you're moving from one shot to another shot. It's not all about the movement, you know. So firstly, you set your composed shot up. You press record on your camera and then you leave it for 10 seconds. And then you do your move and then you leave it for 10 seconds at the end. Now the editor now, when they get this footage, or yourself if you're the editor, you've now got a choice. You've got either the opening shot as a GV, the end shot as a GV, or the actual move in the middle. And a lot of the time you'll actually find the editors, I mean certainly the adventure show, where you know, I give them the pan and often I'll just see they'll just use one of the GVs. So you get basically giving the editor 3 shots for one effort of setting the tripod up. About time, every night, if you want to shoot, every time you stop, set the tripod up, put the camera up, that's a lot, that's time, that's like, you know, 10 minutes of your day. So you're giving them 3 shots for 10 minutes, it's much better than one shaky wobble, you know, especially if you mess up the pan, which are tricky, you know. I'd also say about pans, you know, think about, so you press record, you get your 10 seconds, and then I would say, slowly start to move, and then at constant speed, and then slowly stop. And then give you 10 seconds once you stopped. So think about that, and really kind of practice that, you know. And it's the same rules for tilts and for zooms, you know. You start, you roll a shot, you know, tight on the hands maybe, leave it for 10 seconds, zoom out for the mid shot, leave it for 10 seconds. So then you've got, the editor could, if you want, you can actually then cut from the hand shot straight to the wide, and that will cut fine. Or you can, if they want, they can have the zoom from the hands to the wide. You give them the options in the edit. It's really flexible, it works really well. What else about moves? Yeah, moving, if you try to film someone walk, like this shot here, there's rules for that. So we've got our opening shot, a GV, And then in come the climbers, cue climbers. And then I'm letting them walk, and then as soon as you get to this point here, this third here, I'm then moving the camera, and I'm trying to keep them in this point here. You're starting to sweep, and as soon as you start to get to the 50% point, I'm just going to stop the camera, and then letting them walk out of shot. It's really valuable to have people walk out of shot, or kayak out of shot, or bike out of shot. You know, you don't want to follow them forever. You know, you let them leave the frame, and it works really well in the grammar of editing. As soon as they leave the frame, it's a great point to then cut, or just as they like one foot out the frame. That seems to work really well. One foot out the frame, cut into the next shot. So, I mean, the other thing about this is what we have here when they're here. The reason we have this kind of them walking on this bit here is they need walking space. They need space to go. You know, runners need running space. Bikers need biking space. Gazelles, if you shoot wildlife, gazelles need gazelling space to kind of shoot that way. You know, so if they're on the end of hitch, it just looks wrong. It just looks really weird. So it's really hard, especially if you're shooting biking something, they're moving really quick, and you're trying to keep up with them. It's actually really hard to keep up with them. And as soon as you get to that 50%, you just go, ah, they've gone, and just let them go. Let them flow out of frame. Don't try and, if they get to here, don't then try and move your camera and get them back to here. They've gone, you've lost the shot. Let them go out of frame, recompose, try again. Cool. So interviews. Again, composed. Using you know, head on the upper point, some visually interesting things going on in the magic corner. Firstly, composition. You know, you've got to get this. Again, what you'd call this looking room. I mean, it's the same in portrait painting. You have composition rules apply the same. You know, so you've got them, and they're looking into the looking room. Okay. What you don't want to do, and what you see a lot of, is you have the guy there. So someone set the camera up. They've composed a beautiful shot. But then they've stood over here, and now so he's going to be looking at me this way. It just looks really weird. And unfortunately, I didn't know about this rule for like the first 3 of my films or something. So I've got all these interviews, and the eyes are just wrong. You know, the eyes should be looking this way, to be looking like that, not out with the frame. It just looks really odd. So eye line's really, really important, and the eyes should be looking sort of straight out like this. You shouldn't be looking down. What you see as well sometimes, you can see how people have shot it badly sometimes. You know, that, if I was interviewing this chap here and it's there, I put the camera down here, and I stand by the camera here looking at my viewfinder. Your eyes are looking up at me like that. And I can see, you look at shots where people have, you know, done this interview and oh yeah, I can see where the camera is standing. He's working it from here. If I was shooting here, I'm framing you like that, the lens is down, we're right by the lens. So the eyes are looking just slightly off the lens. Not above the lens, it's happening weird because then you're looking into the camera. The only people who should ever look into the camera are TV presenters. You know, if you're working with a presenter who's kind of the main guy and they're talking to the camera, they should look into the lens. If you're working with a documentary subject, you should look slightly out of the lens. So really, if you shoot this right, it just looks good, it just looks professional. And other people will spot it. I mean, if you shoot an interview badly, because there is this kind of grammar of them, we're used to seeing interviews, you'll immediately make yourself look like a punter. So definitely, you know, spend some time on interview compositions.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What if you're interviewing 2 people?
That's really hard. I try and avoid interviewing 2 people for that reason. I mean, interviewing 2 people, how many people are talking at once? Ask yourself that. Generally only 1. You know, it's pretty rare I do interview 2 people. If I'm interviewing 2 people, I interview 1 at a time, mostly. It's pretty rare I interview 2, unless I actually want to get the interaction. You know, there's something going on, but generally, unless there's a really good reason for it, why would you? You know, it's difficult to compose 2 people. If you are trying to compose 2 people, it's really tricky if they're different height as well. That gets really tricky. But if you are different height,
and the Sherpa,
yeah.
is about half his height.
What I would say is you stick with this rule and you put Kenton eye on here, and wherever the other guy ends up is where you go. So you always go for the highest one.
Yeah.
On there, you know. That's the only thing you can do.
But it just means that, so that's how they work, but so Lacrita's on this side and the interviewer's at this side. So I've got Kenton right, but Lacrita's looking out of frame and talking out of frame,
yeah.
which is a bit jarring.
Yeah.
But luckily Kenton can talk more than most people.
Yeah. So Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I try to avoid interviewing two people if you can. Yeah, but sometimes you can't, I suppose. And sound. Now, I used to use radio mics a bit for interviews, but I almost always use now use a cable mic, just like this setup here. I think these shotgun mics are really good for interviews. Allows you to. It's a much richer sound from this mic, you know, than a tiny little clip mic. And it's you can also point it away from the traffic noise or the bar noise. And when you get to a place, really listen. If you get to an interview location, listen. Like when we went to Stevie's, like we unplugged the fridge. The fridge is always really noisy. So go and unplug the fridge. And my top tip is, if you do unplug someone's fridge, clip your car keys to the plug. Right, otherwise you're gonna get a phone call from them a week later saying, you know, all my freezer's gone. You know, so
Stevie's fridge.
yeah, you don't want to upset Stevie. You know. So yeah, really listen to the background. If there's anything that's making a noise, can you turn it off? You know. So when you think about your interviews, you know, really, you know, prepare your questions ahead of time. You know, and really try and tell a story with your questions. You know, follow a narrative with your questions. The first few questions I would recommend shouldn't be important to your film. It should just be general questions which you can probably drop. You're just kind of warming up, getting into it. You know, nice gentle questions. If you want to ask any controversial questions, say those to the end, just in case they walk off, or get angry, or uncooperative. You know, they decide they no longer want to sit and talk to you for an hour because you just pissed them off because you asked them, "Did you really do that route?" You know, so you know, think about how you order it. You know, and think about if you are going to be you know, talking about emotional issues, death of a friend or whatever. Think about that as well. You know, where point are you going to ask that question? You know? But also be flexible as you ask the questions, see where they're going. You know, if you start talking about that, just let them go with it. And another great tip is, because what I'm doing, I never use my interview questions. You know, I never use my interview questions in audio in the films. You know, I always just have the people speak. Generally, very occasionally, maybe I'll want to slip in. So what you're looking for is what I'd call a good in. It's a good intro line. You know, they're talking for an hour, but you're listening for the point where, yes, I can cut there. I can say, you know, that will work in the film in isolation. That one sentence will work in isolation. And sometimes they'll say something really good, but it won't work. You know, they will just maybe reply to my question, and without my question, it would never work. So what I tend to do is just ask them the question again in a slightly different way. A really good tip is to say, if they tell you something and you want them to expand on it, just pretend you don't understand. Just say, yeah, what do you mean by that? Or how does that work for you? Or how do you feel about that? And they'll then start describing it all again. And the other tip is to say, once they finish talking and giving you the answer, is just wait and sort of stare at them. And then if you stare at them, they'll probably start talking again and maybe give you another profound statement, which is like a bonus, you know. So just let the interview flow. Yeah. So, yeah, key rule in composition, right to left, left to right. So here we've got Tom, you know, he's on the right of the frame looking left, Pete, left looking right. So what you want to do is you want to shoot 50% of your interviews one way, 50% of your interviews the other way. Because if you're cutting from Pete saying one thing to Tom saying the other thing, this cuts really well. You know, but if they were both facing the same way, it looks really weird. And again, you've made everyone think you're a punter. So left to right, right to left. And you can use this creatively as well. For instance, say you're making a film about wind farms. You shoot everyone who's against wind farms from left to right, and everyone's for wind farms right to left. You know, so Tom's like, yeah, I love wind farms, they're awesome. He's like, no, they're terrible. Yeah, they're great, I love them. Oh, think about all the money. Yeah, what about? So you can kind of do that, you know, because generally if you try to build an argument, you know, it works quite well.
Have you ever cheated and flipped a shot in post to make it work?
Only once, I think. Yeah, but just watch out for the logos if you do that. Yeah, we do flip things around. Stills as well, we do that with sometimes, just for better composition or to make a transition work. But yeah, watch out for logos. We've actually reversed logos and done that. Yeah. Good question.
Did you see the outfit thing?
Sorry?
Did you see the outfit thing?
I did see the outfit thing, yeah. But I jumped ahead a bit. Right. Okay, so we move on. We've shot all our footage. Now you go to DIT, which is a digital information technologist, something like that. Basically, it means copying everything from your camera onto your hard drive. So this is a really important stage, particularly if you're on a shoot, you're away for a week or 2 weeks, and you're coming back every day with a card full of stuff, or 2 cards full of stuff, or 4 cards full of stuff, all different cameras. You know, you really need to have a system, and you've got to do it on 2 hard drives. If you just put it on 1 hard drive, then it doesn't really exist. You know, unless it's on 2 hard drives, you know, you might as well have not bothered, because hard drives are like pets, they always die. So, you know, you've got to have it on 2 hard drives, and you've got to have a system. You know, you need a structure, a directory structure. So I always use something like this, which is client, project, day, camera, card. So, you know, it'd be like Wild Country, the project would be new clothing shoot, Stanwich day, or day 1, and then camera, and you know, maybe have like 2 different cameras on the shoot, so you split it up, you know, 5D, PMW 150, and then you might have 1 card or 2 cards for each camera, then structure it. And always copy everything off the card. Don't just think you need like the movie clips or the still, just copy the whole card, put it on there. Because you never know, particularly with ADSL, particularly with some camera formats, you know, you need the card structure. Just the media files won't always work. So make sure you back up everything like that, and the structure. And then this structure I then bring into the edit suite as well. You know, I use the same kind of structure in the edit suite.
What do you do if you're going back doing a recut of something you might have shot months and months ago, and maybe you've got 2 weeks of shooting with loads of days going, and you've got like a shot in your head, and you're trying to remember which solid card it was on?
Yeah, well, I tend to, once I've done this structure, once I've put all the clips in the folder, and then I tend to do what I call a day sequence.
Okay.
So for each day, I put every clip on one sequence.
Okay.
All the 5D shots, all the 150 shots, I put it all in. It's maybe like 4 hours long or something, you know. And then you can, which day was it on? And you can quickly skim through the sequence and find it. Whereas if it's just a load of clips in a bin, you'll never find it.
Yeah.
And I do that for each day, you know, and it seems to work quite well. So you're doing your editing. Think about story when you're doing your editing. That's what my kind of quick way of doing. I mean, because I use interview, I would always, you know, I cut the interview first. I mean, with Andy Cave Film Distilled, you know, I had like 5 hours of interview, and I cut that down and I split it up into various sections. So I had these sequences, you know, like early life, mining, ice climbing, Scottish winter climbing, the Alps. So I had like maybe 20 different subject sequences, and I just went through all the interviews, put in any clip which I thought might match those subjects, and then I save. I create a lot of sequences in Premiere. You know, and then I duplicate all the sequences and then trim them down. So then for each subject, and then trim it from like, if it's like 10 minutes, I then trim it down to like 5 minutes, and totally boil it down and whittle it away. And only then do I start thinking about trying to order those sequences. So I work strictly on interview only first. I get all the interview down first, that's telling the story. And then once I've worked out the interview, what story I'm telling, I then think, right, how am I going to visually tell this? And then I start bringing in the actual footage, the climbing footage, or whatever else we put in on top of the audio. So I really work with, you know, get the interview down first here in a sequence, you know. Just a little, one of the great things, a little tip is that in story is you always try to, I call it the send not rule, and I explain why. And it's, if I'm filming a climber, you know, about to do a route, I want the people to think he's going to fall off. He's going to fall off. He's going to fall off. And then he does it, and it's a surprise. Or if I know he's going to fall off, I want the audience to think he's going to do it. So the music is driving. Yeah, he's going to do it. He's positive. He's going to do it. We've lined up before. We said, oh, you know, we've got an interview before, and he's saying, yeah, the conditions are really good. It's going to be awesome today. So you build the audience thinking, yeah, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. And then he falls off, and it's a surprise. So you basically try to lead the audience down one way, and then surprise them. You know, whereas it's very easy when you're doing editing that you almost set it up and you almost give away the ending. You know, you sort of say, yeah, everything's really good, we're going to do it today. Then he does it. It's like, oh, well, yeah, that's okay. But there's no surprise, you know. So try and think about that in your edit. Send not rule. It's good. So another, it's just a tiny little tip, but it's really powerful. It'll make your films just flow so much better. And that's called I call it the staggered edit. I don't think anyone else calls it the staggered edit. I think people call it the J cut. I'm not sure about. I've not been to film school, you know. And it's basically just the rule that. So here's Pete saying something really interesting here. Nice bit of interview, just chatting about something. And now we got some live action footage here, some climbing. So what we don't do is we don't wait till the footage finishes and then show Pete. What we do is we stagger the edit. So the climbing footage is still going on. Pete starts to talk. He's like, oh yeah, it's really cool. And then we see him in vision. And then we go back to that, and then we stagger, and he carries on talking at the end over the next clip. So we just stagger these edits. It just makes the edit just flow so much better. It's a simple tip, but it makes a massive difference. So this is what you're aiming towards. This is what you're going for. You're going for picture lock. You know, this is when you've done all the edit, you've told all your story, you've got everything in place, and now this is an exciting part of the project. You're kind of saying picture lock. this is the film. You know, I'm not going to change the structure, the story. All I'm going to do now is work on finishing the film. So, in order to finish the film, you've really got kind of 2 big chunks left. Once you get to this stage, you've got 2 things to think about, and that's sound mix and colour grade. Now, I mean, it's your sound mixing, you know, I mean, but bear in mind, Chris studied this sound mixing for 4 years, 5 years, university. So I'm going to do it in 2 minutes. I would say, you know, if you're making films yourself in, you know, in Final Cut or Premiere or whatever, just learn how to use some sound mixing software as well. You know, go to lynda.com, have a look at Soundtrack Pro or Audition or I don't know, any audio mixing tool. It's making a massive difference. And it's actually, once you get good at it, it's actually quicker than trying to fix it. You know, if you're trying to mix audio in their slot, you know, it's going to take you forever. You'll be adjusting every little clip audio, and you kind of take you forever to do it. Once you get the hang of using a sound editing software, it's amazing. You can do amazing things quite quickly because you can apply effects to like the whole of a track, and you just speed things up, and you give a really smooth edit. What you effectively like kind of mixing it like you would mix a music track. It's a very similar process.
Accuracy is also the thing. In a video editing, they've got 25 points in a second, whereas
Yeah.
you make it 48,000, you want 48,000 points in a second.
What he said. So it's all editing software. You just do this export OMF, and OMF is just a general format, and what it does, it puts all these little clips, and it just exports the audio into a new file, a new directory structure, and then you can load that into any audio editing software. And then once you're in the audio editing software, you can do some great stuff. So here you've just got just EQing a track. So basically you put all just other important thing about editing, which leads on to this, is that you've got to, you see how it's all on different tracks. You know, you got to I call it checkerboarding. You got to put all this here is interview. This is quite an interview heavy film. All this here is both these 2 tracks are kind of live action, a couple of effects, music. So you kind of checkerboarding, you're mixing it up. So when you go into edit, that transfers into your sound mix as well. And then I'd break it up again. I would actually put every separate interview on its own track. So you're going to end up with 50 tracks, 100 tracks, whatever. There's no problem having loads of tracks. So what that allows you to do is you've got Tom's interview for Wide Boys. You know, it's all in there. It means you can EQ the whole of that interview clips. It might be 20 clips in that project, but you're processing them all at the same time, not individually in the edit suite. So it's just super quick, and you apply an EQ effect. And one of the big things for filmmaking is trying to make people understand what people are saying. There's nothing more frustrating of an audience if something is said and they can't understand what it's said. You know, and that happens a lot in mountain films. You know, so I would say if you can't understand what people are saying, then it shouldn't be there. You know, so if you learn about audio, you'll be able to see there's things you can do to make that work better. I mean, you'll learn that the frequencies that we're working at, the human voice ranges from like sort of 100 hertz to 5,000 hertz roughly. So you boost those frequencies, and you'll just make you make them more audible. You know, you make people can understand what you're saying. And you can do this. I love this trick. This is called, I call this the music trench. So here you EQ your music. So this is particularly important when you've got music playing and you've also got chat on top, right? And music occupies the same space as chat. In terms of music occupies a massive space compared to chat. But what you can do is you can kind of dig a hole here. This is EQ the music. So you take out the chunk of the music which is going to compete with the chat, with the narration. And what that allows you to do is you can keep the music reasonably high, so you can enjoy the music. You can hear the big bassy sounds of the music. You can hear the tambourine jingly sounds this end, but the voices are going to fly through this trench basically. So all your chat will fly through this trench. If you don't do that, the only option you've got is just to reduce the volume of the music. And so this is just a really neat trick. So you've done your sound mix. That was a very quick cover of sound. Sorry, Chris, but you can study it for 4 years as well if you want. But I'd definitely recommend going on to like lynda.com, which is an amazing website. It teaches you every bit of software on there. There's amazing training videos. Just learn how to use audio. It'll make a massive difference to your films. So finally, it's the grade. This is what this is what makes your film look nice, not just sound nice. And it's effectively like, I presume you're kind of familiar with photoshopping digital stills. It's exactly the same process. You basically Photoshop every shot in your film. Maybe not every frame, but certainly every shot is photoshopped. And not only is it photoshopped, but it's photoshopped in a way that they all match and all go together. So, you know, we've turned from that. This is from distilled. So you can see we've just kind of like desaturated, and that kind of gives your film a whole kind of consistent feel. And it doesn't even take that long, you know. I mean, it's not a. It depends how you do it. There's lots of ways to do it. Lots of great software. You can do a lot of it actually in the edit suite, but it just makes a massive difference. I didn't actually know about this until I was about 4 films in. So, my early films look shocking. And also at this point is where you can start to match up. You know, like talk about the close-ups. Like in E11, there's close-ups of hands, which we shot like a week later on a completely different time of day, and the light looks all wrong. Now I could do that, and it would just grade and just match them. You know, this also helps if you're using lots of different types of cameras as well, using DSLRs as well as bigger cameras. Then there's you know, you make them look similar. You're kind of smoothing out the differences between the two cameras. Cool. So I was going to talk quickly about how do you try and make a living out of this, and that's incredibly difficult, I think, and it's constantly changing. I mean, there's a few options. I mean, you know, you can sell your films on DVD, download. That's difficult. It's very hard to get people to buy things, but there's other options. Now, you know, there's lots of video on demand channels now. You can make money. It is possible to actually make money from a film festival, but only if you win awards. So that's be motivating for you. I'm not going to talk too much more about that. And also, finally, is crowdfunding. I mean, crowdfunding is kind of just coming in now. There's at least 2 films at this festival that have been crowdfunded. If you're not familiar with crowdfunding, you can check out Kickstarter.com. You know, basically, this is Don Bush's film. You know, he made a little video to pitch it. You know, he says, "Please help me make this film. In return for helping me, you know, in return, if you send me £10, £20, I'll send you a DVD. I'll send you." So it's a bit like pre-selling. Rewards, and you know, he managed to raise £3,500. He's made the film. The film's here at the festival, and you know, people are raising millions on this platform now. You know, if you can engage with an audience and persuade people that your film is something worth making, then people will. You know, you could easily raise £10,000, £20,000, and if you know, as long as you've got an audience for it, and if you haven't got an audience for it, then you've got to question why you're making the film anyway, I suppose. So, right, I'm going to leave it there. So, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, that'd be good. Or we can just kind of